Hey guys, this is Chesser. Welcome to my new video, DPS. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the roles of DPS, the different types of DPS ships, battleships, battlecruisers, and cruisers, the on-grid positioning you need, as well as transversal control and learning how to apply your damage. Before this gets too boring, let's go over a quick clip to show why DPS ships are very important to have in gang. So why is a DPS ship important? In a situation like this where you find a Charon in a belt, mining with his skiff buddies, along with some rattlesnakes that come in to try to save it, having a lot of damage and the ability to project that damage is going to allow a small roaming gang to inflict maximum hurt. Now, the Boghorn, as you've maybe seen in other videos, using it nano-wise, I've attempted to try and use that as a DPS ship, but this is just an example more so as what a DPS ship brings to the table. Now, there's many different ways to go about getting lots of damage. You know, the cruisers have the Gila, they have the Rail Vigilant, they have the Vexor Navy issue with geckos. You know, those ships bring a lot of damage. Unfortunately for a lot of DPS ships, as you go up the classes into battleships eventually, the amount of money that you need to put into your ship to make it kind of viable in the current frig meta, the current metagame, is quite a lot. So I'm going to try and focus the discussion into ships that normal everyday people can afford or would be willing to fly. Obviously, on the battleship side of things, you know, the Macarial, the Barghest, you know, those ships are excellent DPS ships. They have amazing damage, they have amazing projection, but they may not always be in the budget range of everyone who wants to go out and small gang PvP. So because of that, I'm going to try and give this a nice broad general overview of what you need to be looking for in a DPS ship and how you can fly DPS, you know, more so on a budget. As this clip is slowly wrapping up here, I'm just going to talk quickly about the attack battlecruisers. Now, the Talos, the Tornado, and the Oracle are all fairly decent ships. However, I think the Oracle stands head and shoulders above the rest. A DPS ship's main role is to be able to project damage and to be able to apply that damage. And the issue with the Tornado and the Talos compared to the Oracle is, and I will show this in EFT files, is just the fact that the Oracle has way more projection and way more damage than either of those two ships. Now, the Tornado can bring a little bit stronger tank, and the Talos has, you know, a little bit more utility with that light drone bay, but it's nothing to eclipse, you know, what an Oracle can do. And I think I'm going to try and highlight here with some of the other clips that I'm going to be showing you. As we're just finishing cleaning up the rest of this gang here, I just want to make one last final note, is that T1 battleships. Now, Tech 1 battleships can work, and other than going into pirate, I think that battleships in general are weaker than the attack battlecruisers. I feel that the only Tech 1 battleships that really can semi-work would be the Typhoon or the APOC. The APOC is basically an Oracle with better application bonuses. However, it does have significantly less DPS. And then the other ship that I've been playing around a little bit with is the Typhoon and the Tempest. Now, the Tempest in particular doesn't have a ton of damage, but 2 heavy newts brings quite a bit of utility and kind of makes up for its lack of damage. But I hope that this clip here just shows you, in an almost comical way, why sometimes having a ship with really, really big guns is useful in a fleet. Now that we've kind of seen something a little bit more lighthearted, let's discuss the 4 things that a DPS ship is looking for to bring to the table. The first requirement is going to be, of course, high damage. The second one is projection, the third is speed, and the fourth is utility. Now, high damage you can get a number of ways, and we're going to be going over some EFT files that are going to show some ships that can bring a lot of DPS. Projection is another important thing. You know, having a ship that does a lot of damage at close to scram web range is fairly useless in a DPS role. DPS ships need to be able to apply that damage anywhere on the grid and be able to assist anti-support and tackle ships once they've caught something and ran it down. The other thing that a DPS ship needs is speed. In a nano fleet, and when flying small gang, speed is life. If you cannot keep away from their anti-support or from their recons or from their light tackle long enough for your anti-support to be able to shed that from your ship, you're going to lose and die in a fire. And the last thing you need is utility. Now, some ships bring no utility. For example, the Oracle. That has nothing other than damage. DPS ships are not meant to have points, webs, or newts really. Their main primary goal is to bring damage. Now, some ships may not have as much damage, and can make up for that. For example, the Tempest can make up for not having as much damage as the Oracle nor the Projection, with 2 heavy newts, along with a long point, a web, and a lot of EHP. So you need to kind of look at what ship you can bring to the table that's going to maximize the effectiveness in your gang. So in this upcoming fight, I'm flying an Oracle. In fleet with me are 2 Confessors, a Carries, and a Phantasm. Now, this fight, I think in particular, really helps to highlight some of the strengths of a well-flown DPS ship. Now, I start the fight at range, which is exactly where I want to be. The Oracle has around 900 heated DPS, out to around 70 to 75 kilometers. And once I'm out at that range, transversal control isn't a huge issue for me with an MWD and cruiser. I attempt to control space and generally just slow boat in order to apply maximum damage to cruisers that are landing on grid. Now, the entire point of a DPS ship is to really be an anti-cruiser type of platform, and I think that this fight really highlights that. Orthreses, multiple Orthreses, a Falcon, and a Logi ship are all just getting completely cut apart by the amount of damage that I can put on target with the Oracle. And that's kind of how you want to play any DPS ship. Now, the fight that we have here, my gang, we have the Carries, 2 Confessors, and the Phantasm. That entire gang right there is a self-sufficient small gang in and of itself. And the biggest issue that I find in bringing DPS ships to a gang is the fact that they need a well-supported and well-structured gang already in place before you can think about adding a DPS ship reliably. There are some situations where you can fly an anti-support ship and just a DPS ship. However, I won't be covering something like that in this video. I'll just be focusing more on the small gang. Now, the reason why the Oracle fits in well here is because our support backbone by the Carries, as well as the large amount of anti-support and anti-tackle that we have thanks to 2 Confessors and the Phantasm, makes me feel very comfortable flying this Oracle. Now, the entire point of the Oracle is to basically sit out and keep enemies at the end of the stick at 60 to 70 kilometers and just apply your just jaw-dropping DPS. This anti-cruiser work that the Oracle excels at is really shown here in this fight, I think, by taking down multiple Orthreses, a Falcon, and a Logi ship on the grid without really stressing our gang too much. And that's partly due because the enemies that we're fighting are warping in kind of piecemeal, but it's also because the Oracle's DPS just allows it to shred through cruiser EHP like it wasn't there. When I first went out with this gang, I considered for a while bringing another anti-support ship, and if I would have done that, this fight would have been much more difficult, if not almost impossible, trying to deal with that amount of range DPS out of the Orthres, as well as the Logi and the E-War background thanks to their Falcon. It's really nice to have the Oracle there just to kind of act as a battering ram to quickly take down lower EHP cruiser ships. And the damage that the Oracle can do from such extreme ranges really helps you capitalize on mistakes that sometimes weaker pilots will make because of the fact that you can just kill them so quickly. And that's very, very helpful. Wrapping up this little clip is just my EM Therm locked gang trying to kill a Loki, which is going to be almost impossible thanks to the Minmatar Tech 3 resist bonuses. Up next, I'm going to have a small portion of some EFT files to show you, just to give you some examples of kind of the numbers and the play style, the positioning that DPS ship really tries to use in a fight. This one here for me, I basically slow-boated and stayed control space the entire time because once the Oracle's at range, it really has no reason to burn around unless it is just to reposition. I hope you enjoyed. In case any of you are wondering, the program that I'm using here is EFT, E-Fitting Tool, or you can conversely use PIFA, both of which I highly suggest new players or anyone grab because it allows you to fully understand ships, the numbers, how they work, and what it looks like without having to try it out in-game first. Starting with DPS ships, I want to start with the cruisers, and I feel that the 2 strongest cruisers for damage are certainly the Gila and the Rail Vigilant. Starting with the Gila here, the low slots are fairly self-explanatory. Drone damage amplifiers, a DCU. Mid slots, the Gila is built more around utility, and I do have a little bit of bling there. However, if you don't feel comfortable running a faction point or a faction web, you can always drop the high slots to be able to fit Tech 2 gear. Now, the Gila is well-rounded in the fact that with light missiles and the web, it can take care of itself against most light tackle and anti-support, as well as dealing an extremely strong amount of DPS with its two infiltrators. The infiltrators themselves, along with that drone nav comp that you have in the mids, are extremely fast, approaching 5,000 ms at their top speed, which really allows it to catch most of the frigates in the game, certainly once you have a web on them. Now, the Gila is a little slow at only 2k a second before heat, so it does like Lynx, but certainly doesn't need them with the fitting that I have here. Of course, its tank as well, nothing to scoff at, pushing almost 600 DPS with heat. So overall, the Gila is very well-rounded, very strong ship, and you really can't go wrong with one. The other ship that I have listed here is the Rail Vigilant, and the Vigilant in the shield fit as I have here really needs all the shield EHP it can get, especially when I'm not fitting any shield rigs. That's why I don't fit a point on it, but I certainly still want to utilize that 90% web bonus. Low slots, again, self-explanatory, looking for damage, looking for speed. Mid slots, trying to cram as much EHP as I can on there, and then of course the high slots I have the railguns intact. Now, the nice thing about the Vigilant is with Javelin and the 90% web, Javelin giving you tracking bonus and the web, of course, stopping anything in its tracks, 750 heated DPS is extremely strong. Couple that with the Vigilant's extreme base speed at 2.6k a second before Lynx, Snakes, or Heat, and this ship is extremely strong at running away and dealing with light or smaller tackle. Antimatter looks like this. And, mostly you're going to be fighting with plutonium, 37 plus 27, pushing almost 700 DPS. What I really like about the Vigilant, though, is you can always switch to Spike and do almost 430 DPS out to 100 kilometers, should you need it, although that's more comedy than anything else. This is, of course, before its substantial drone bay. It can fit a full flight of mediums. So, all in all, the Vigilant brings a ton of DPS to the table, and I think it's a really great cruiser damage ship along with the Gila. Next, we're going to talk about the attack battlecruisers. The first that I have here is the Talos, and discussing the Talos and the Naga, the reason why I do not discuss the Naga at all is because using blasters it's useless because they still don't get the range that you're looking for, and with this optimal range bonus and no tracking, it has a very difficult time applying its DPS compared to the Talos thanks to that nice tracking bonus. Now this Talos fit here is fit a little bit more for speed and a little bit more for kiting. The original Talos that became popular using blasters fits 2 mag stabs and 2 tracking enhancers. However, after a number of nerfs and the TE nerfs to fall off, that really isn't possible anymore to fit the Talos like that way. I don't like the Talos all that much, but if I was going to fit one, this is how I would make it look. The tracking computer is tracking speed script loaded to help kind of offset the terrible tracking that railguns have, and I would generally sit in antimatter range with antimatter loaded. That being said, almost 800 DPS with heat. The Talos is very quick even without Lynx and Snakes, so definitely a ship that can hold its own. The next ship that I have here is the Tornado. Tornado has a little bit more EHP, about the same speed, and unfortunately it uses autocannons. Now autocannons, you can use barrage, and it did get a nice buff recently, but all in all, there's not the best weapon system. However, with RFEMP, especially at the close ranges between 40 and mid 30s, it can hold its own and it does okay. Its mid slots, you can drop that long point for a web if you want, or an invuln, so you can fit web long point for that more utility if you'd like. But I just want to throw a shout out to #GorskyCar. You'll notice that all of my battlecruisers have just one hyperspatial now, and they actually warp faster than a cruiser. That was a nice boom to making their ability to be viable in fleet that much more increased, because now you actually warp faster than cruisers, which kind of offsets some of the problems that they were facing earlier. Lastly, I'm going to save the Oracle, which is my personal favorite, and this is the Oracle fit that I was using in almost all of my clips. As I was saying before, you're pushing almost 900 of 870 DPS out to 75 kilometers with heated Scorch, and the tracking that you get at that range with the Scorch and close range weapons is just unbelievable. The Oracle is definitely the benchmark for long range DPS ships, definitely should be noted here. The other thing just to note is even close range as well. You can switch to conflag, 1200 DPS. It's basically an Abaddon as far as damage is concerned, and I think it's very strong. Lastly, I'm just going to review the quintessential kiting battleship, which is the Machariel. Here's just a basic Machariel fit. I fit mine a little bit more for utility with the web and a metastasis. Some people like an invul and then a little bit more tank. However, I feel that this fit is a little bit more versatile in the current PvP meta. The last thing that I'm going to show you in EFT is I'm just going to bring up this DPS graph, linear graph, just to show you kind of where ships lie now after a lot of changes that we've had recently. So I'm going to have everyone shooting the Machariel, but here's a Machariel shooting a Machariel, and we'll pick 55k as kind of our reference point here for our projected DPS, and it gets 619 with no drones and barrage, which isn't bad. However, the Oracle starts to bring it to shame, because when you switch the Oracle to Scorch, you can see why I love this ship so much. Compared to a Machariel at 50 kilometers, it blows it out of the water. And further still, almost at 80k, it just completely destroys it. So I don't know why people are so afraid of a Machariel when there are other ships flying around that can do the job just as well. Here's another example. Here's our Tornado with barrage, a little bit less than the Machariel. We have our Talos, of course, which sits very, very nice. Talos has close DPS to an Oracle, but its tracking is significantly worse. So even just a little bit of battleship moving, it's already making the tracking pretty significantly bad there. The last I'm just going to show you is the Vigilant. That was with Spike, so let's load it up to something more towards your fighting range, which I would assume to be plutonium most of the time, maybe even uranium. But the Vigilant doesn't look too bad here in this yellow line, considering it's a cruiser and it's extremely fast. And then lastly, of course, you have the Gila, which is going to be here in our pink line, and it does very, very well for itself as well. Overall, I just wanted you to kind of see and visualize the kind of DPS and projection that a small gang is looking for when I'm talking about a DPS ship. I hope this kind of illuminated some ships for you and some fitting ideas. I hope. Now that we've discussed some of our EFT files, I have some additional footage to show you about some DPS work. I apologize that most of the clips are from an Oracle point of view, but it's the ship that I find myself flying the most because it mirrors a Slicer very much. Here in this fight, it's an Oracle, a Garmer, and a Malediction versus this number of pirate faction cruisers that you see here. Now, this fight is going to use a little bit of the mobility of the Oracle and heat to try and keep off their damage. So in transversal control with fast cruisers such as this, if I start burning away here, it's going to be a bad idea for them to basically click approach me, which is currently what they're doing. Another thing that really helps the Oracle in a situation like this is once you start hitting your MWD, you're burning away at such a high speed that it's going to be difficult for ships that are chasing you to get a significant amount of transversal if they want to keep deciding to close range. Now, this fight here is just a perfect example of what the Oracle wants to be doing, which is sitting out far beyond the most other damaging ships. Even long-range cruisers like the Noman are finding it difficult and are struggling to hit me out at 60 to 70 kilometers, while I'm just hitting them for absolutely full damage. While they're MWDing even somewhat near me, as long as I'm not trying to MWD to the side and keep stringing them out in this nice line, their transversal, like I said earlier, is approaching zero. Using my heated MWD, I'm helping to just reduce tracking even more. And even though we're just using Garmer's long point to just keep them on the field while I slowly DPS them down, I'm the only DPS here, but I am just absolutely shredding through them. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier in this video as to why it's very important to, when you can, have someone ship up into a DPS class, and that is just to be able to clear the field of cruisers. A lot of cruisers' hulls are very dangerous, and having a ship that can clear them easily, you know, the Rapiers, the Hugins, the Recons in general, it's very, very useful. This last clip that I'm going to show you guys up here is another Oracle clip that I have when I was flying with some people out of my micro gang channel. We'll get to that in just a moment. So this again is me flying an Oracle again. However, this time I'm flying with a better fleet. I have much more fleshed out anti-support with 2 Omen Navy issues, a Confessor, and of course a support wing provided by the carries. We're in here engaging in Pandemic Horde space, and overall things are starting out really well for us. They warp in an Augurer by itself, which I can almost immediately melt, and here is a perfect example of why the Oracle's great. They warp in a Curse, I'm on it, and very, very shortly I'm pushing the Curse down and it's going to be dead and away. It's a huge threat to our gang, and being able to obliterate it very quickly is going to be a huge help for us in this fleet. Very, very nicely, very nice piloted, by the way, where they're sending in Crucifiers in order to completely shut down my Oracle with TDs. You know, one of the problems with flying turret-based DPS ships is E-War, and Crucifiers are a great way to stop an Oracle because they can lock you out to 150 and completely shut you down. There I am, just applying additional DPS to the Vexor and just bringing in some increased damage here. Now, that Rifter almost died. We didn't have him pointed and he warped out, but at 70k, I almost volleyed and one-shot him. That's what I mean by great, great tracking. This Sacrilege here, too, even maximum tank fit, I'm not even heating, and we can break him down fairly quickly, considering that we only have 2 Omen Navy issues and myself consisting for DPS, while we have the Confessor there, definitely for the anti-tackle. Once this Sacrilege goes down, you know, we're going to look for other targets of opportunity, but overall, I just wanted to show this fight because I had a great time flying with some of the gentlemen that we picked up from a micro game channel, and, you know, this turned out to actually be a pretty good fight. I'm just showing just some small portions of it, but, you know, got a lot of nice kills, and here the rest of the gang, even though they outnumber us, are starting to just burn away and warp out as soon as we get even closer than damage range. So overall, it was a good fight. I just want to throw shout outs to thanks of everyone that's flying with me. All of my fleet mates that were in this video, of course, made it possible because you can't just fly solo and hope to win all the time. So big shout out to them because they're great pilots and they're doing the right things. I really hope you guys enjoyed this latest Archetype video, and fly safe. Take care.